LSO has some work for us. Pierre, you want to walk us through?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Pierre Chenet with LSO. I'll provide a brief overview of the research memorandum on remote access to court records in other states. That's item 14-1 in your meeting materials. So the memorandum surveys remote access to court records in 4 states, Minnesota, Missouri, Pennsylvania, and Utah. And these states were selected because they each represent a distinct approach to remote access to court records. The memorandum also briefly covers remote access in Wyoming, which is mostly limited to Supreme Court docket information for public cases and fee-based access for Wyoming Chancery Court cases. And for each state that I surveyed, the memorandum provides information in 4 different categories. Number 1 is the authority permitting remote access, whether either statutes or court rules. Number 2 is the categories of accessible and restricted records. Number 3 is an overview of the online portals used to search for and access court records. And number 4 is whether those web portals are free to use. So one finding from the memorandum is that every state attempts to balance transparency and public access with the need to protect privacy. And as a result of that, cases containing sensitive personal information, so think of social security numbers or medical records, are generally excluded from remote access. Another finding is the variation in the types of documents that are remotely accessible. For example, Pennsylvania generally limit remote access to docket sheets, while Minnesota and Missouri allow users to download PDFs of remotely accessible documents. I also want to highlight the distinction between public access and remote access. In Minnesota, for example, they distinguish between the 2 concepts, and public access refers to accessing court documents at a courthouse terminal or at the state law library, whereas remote access refers to accessing documents from a personal device that is not connected to a court system. In Missouri, by contrast, they appear to treat public access and remote access equally, meaning that documents that are available publicly at a courthouse are also accessible remotely. And I would also like to spend a few moments talking about the Utah section that starts on page 12 of the memorandum. So until January 1st of next year, remote access to court records in Utah is available through a fee-based system called Exchange. But in 2026, so just a few months ago, the Utah Legislature passed House Bill 540, which is item 14-2 in your meeting materials. And the legislation requires free access to all public court records, moving away from the fee-based system. And the bill is much broader than just covering remote access, but I do not touch on those parts in the memo. One thing about House Bill 540 is that it makes Utah unique among the states that I surveyed because it requires remote access in statutes. In other states, remote access is governed through court rules and not statutes. And another aspect of the Utah law that I want to highlight is that it removes the distinction between public access and remote access, whereas Utah used to be something similar to Minnesota. It's moving towards something closer to Missouri. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Pierre. As usual, great report. Any questions? Committee? Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Pierre, for building this document. My question is, since we don't have a unified court system, do we have an idea on what courts are allowing remote access or what courts are allowing public access right now in Wyoming?
Pierre?
So remote access in Wyoming, and I believe is limited to docket sheets in public cases at the Supreme Court level, and there is a fee-based access for Wyoming Chancery courts. But if I'm not correct, I'd be happy to be corrected.
Further questions? Okay, thank you again. Ms. Butler. Welcome. We have judges and Ms. Butler.
Hello again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Elisa Butler. I'm the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. And right next to me, I have two very esteemed judges, and I am going to let them introduce themselves while I try to figure out Zoom.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, my name is Sean Chambers. I'm a circuit judge here in Cheyenne.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm Donessa Snyder. I'm a district judge in Rawlins.
Ms. Butler, you prepared some or provided us with some materials about this topic. Why don't you walk us through your materials?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, happy to do it. And I would just point out, I'm happy to be interrupted at any time. So if you all have any questions, please don't hesitate. You will not ruin my flow. I would just like to note one thing. Mr. Cheney was absolutely correct in terms of what we have in terms of remote public access in Wyoming. The Chancery Court does offer remote public access for a fee. At the Supreme Court level, you can access the docket sheet and then like the opinions of the court through the Judicial Branch website, and that is a free service. So those are the two pieces of remote public access we have in Wyoming. Every courthouse, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute, every courthouse in the state of Wyoming has a public access terminal. So you can go to any courthouse in the state and you can access court documents from that public access terminal in any county. So Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to start out, we'll go ahead and move into our Wyoming Judicial Branch strategic plan. A few years ago, the Wyoming Judicial Branch moved to a new governance model and created what we call the Wyoming Judicial Council. And that council, of which both Judge Chambers and Judge Snyder are members, that council now makes policy decisions for the branch. And that includes the district courts too. As I mentioned before, they are independent entities, but for policy decisions, they have essentially joined the Judicial Council to help make uniform policy decisions that can be used statewide in the branch. So that has been a really great move, I believe, for the branch. And one of the things that came along with that is the Judicial Branch started strategic planning, and we have never done that before, which may sound surprising, but we have not. Historically, you know, the branch was designed to make decisions and decide cases. And as we've moved into this new world, there are a lot more policy decisions that the branches had to make. And so that council has created a strategic plan over the last few years. Last year, we just created a brand new one. So we've had, this is the second strategic plan we are under right now. And what you'll see in your materials is we've set forth two strategic objectives of the branch that we think play into the discussion that we're having today. The first one is in strategic pillar 1, judicial branch excellence and innovation. And we're just looking at, again, ways to use technology to its greatest effect for the branch while balancing the risks that come with some of those technological changes. And then pillar 2, public trust and accountability. We recognize that this is something we're always going to have to strive for in our branch of government, and I think you all feel the same. The way that we are most effective is when we engender public trust and accountability. And so having access to court documents and court records is definitely something we see as a benefit as we strive to enhance the trust in our branch of government. The judicial branch really has been moving towards enhanced access for constituents and for the public and for users of the court system for many, many years. It may not seem as robust as some would like, but we do have, over the last few years, as I mentioned, we have moved toward e-filing. We have e-citations. We allow litigants, defendants to pay their citations online, so they are able to access their citations and pay online. We have a jury management system, which allows jurors to fill out jury questionnaires online without having to fill out paper and send that in, and even ask for things like excusals. We have recently, over the last probably 4 years, we recently redesigned our entire public access system that lives on those courthouse terminals. So there was a time where you couldn't do searches statewide, and now you can. So you can go to any terminal in the state and you can search for cases statewide in any county. So there have been steps towards more robust access, and we'll continue to look at ways that we can provide that service to the public. Again, just with the knowledge that we need to balance the risks and the privacy concerns that come with those enhanced access for the public. So moving on, Mr. Chairman, we have a couple things we wanted to touch base with you about today that we think is important as we talk about public access, and in particular, remote public access. The first, and probably one of the most important for us, is just the funding and how to ensure that we can obtain funding to implement more robust public access in the state. What we have existing court accessibility, what you can get at the courthouses, and what kind of access you all have and the public has, what it takes to implement a new system for us. And then this is kind of tying into what the discussion we had this morning, which is, what is remote public access? What does that mean to you? What does it mean to us? And how do we define where we want to go with something like remote public access? And then, of course, you'll have some information, and I hope they chime in along the way, from the judges in terms of some of the specific things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So starting with technology funding, the judicial branch receives basically 2 types of funding for technology. One is a general fund appropriation from this body, and that appropriation covers the same kinds of goods and services that is appropriated to ETS. So things like infrastructure, cybersecurity, internet, cloud storage. We have Microsoft licensing under that appropriation, any kind of backup and redundancy that we need. We made a pretty hefty general fund request this past session for technology, and we were very grateful to have received a good amount of that general funding. It was incredibly helpful to shore up some of our items that we knew we were going to run out of money for, things like Microsoft licensing, which can be incredibly expensive. So very grateful for that. There is one piece, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that was not approved, which does have an impact on our other funding source, and that is a special revenue fund. We talked about this morning. It is the Judicial Systems Automation Account, often referred to as the Court Automation Account. That is established in Wyoming Statute 52120. And as I mentioned this morning, it was created or enacted in 2000. That revenue is generated from filing fees in all jurisdictions in the state. And so for the vast majority of cases in Wyoming, there is a fee associated with that goes to that special revenue account. And then we use the money out of that special revenue account to pay for a couple of things. The three biggest pieces are enterprise software applications, which again, we talked about this morning. That would include something like remote public access, courtroom technology, which is very similar to what you all have today, and it allows litigants and people to join remotely in our courtrooms. It has been really helpful, especially considering the vast distances between courthouses in Wyoming. And so that is something that I think provides a lot of benefit to the citizens, a lot of benefit to law enforcement agencies, just a lot of benefit across the state. That is a very large expense that comes out of that fund. And that special revenue fund also funds 13 technology positions. So within the statute 52120, the 2 things that the statute contemplates covering are those enterprise software applications and courtroom technology. There's no specific language in the statute that says it should also cover the costs of our staff, But that has happened over the years as we've asked for additional positions, and those have been placed in that special revenue fund rather than in the general fund. So those are the two funding sources, Mr. Chairman. And that next page is just the language that is in 52120A about what that account is intended to cover. One other piece of that statute, which I didn't include the language here, is we are required to report to you all annually. We just provided a report during session this last year. We will provide another report to you annually beginning in the fall. And that report will provide you with information about the spending out of the JSA account and what we're looking at doing with technology over the next few years.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, moving the 13 positions, technology positions to the general fund, what would be the savings to the JSA account?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, so that next page, we look at Wyoming Judicial Branch Technology Funding. And so what you'll see on there, we do 10-year projections. You'll see employee salary and benefits about halfway down. This biennium or this upcoming biennium, we're looking at $3.7 million per biennium for those salaries and benefits for that staff. We anticipate that will increase over time as we have additional benefits, additional increases in employee compensation. So over the next 8 years, between 3.5 and 4 million per biennium. So this next page with this little spreadsheet, as I mentioned, what we do in our branch is we do 10-year projections. So we take our very incredible staff and our CFO, she looks at what we have coming up, what kind of costs, what kind of maintenance and support, and then what kind of replacements we know we're going to need over the next few years. She works with the head of our IT division and the head of our software applications division, and they all come up with a snapshot of what we anticipate in terms of costs over the next 10 years. We update this quite often. I would say almost quarterly, we're looking at these numbers to determine what kind of costs we have upcoming. So what you'll see here is at the top, we have a beginning fund balance, and then we have estimated revenue. Now that estimated revenue, you'll see goes up slightly, but it's based on a 4-year average. And those filing fees that we see coming out of our courts, they have not increased substantially. They haven't decreased substantially. They've stayed pretty steady over time. So that's that estimated revenue. And then below there, we talk about the costs that we have within the branch that comes out of this JSA account. The first is a list of ongoing costs. I've already talked about most of these: employee salary and benefits, our enterprise software applications.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just back up a bit, Ms. Butler. On the compensation for the IT folks, are you in line with the state's compensation for IT, or how do you do that to make sure there's parity there?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, we are. So we have done a classification within our branch of government that mirrors what they've done with the executive branch, and all of our positions we've crosswalked over to the executive branch positions, and so they are very much in parity. We work with HRD pretty regularly on that. So moving down our ongoing costs, we have the enterprise software application. We have maintenance and support, courthouse remodels and travel. That's just kind of some miscellaneous, I don't want to say minor, but they're not, some of our more substantial expenses. And then customization. So we talked this morning about how we go out and contract for every one of our enterprise systems. There are very, very few exceptions to that. We don't really develop in-house. And so all of those systems are called off-the-shelf systems. And we often have to customize those systems to what we need here in Wyoming because they're not built for Wyoming. So we have to add some features in to make sure that they function in the way that we need. So that's that ongoing line. We always have an ongoing line item for customizations. What we're finding over time is that line item is not nearly enough to cover the amount of customizations that are wanted and needed by all of the users of those systems. So the next chunk you'll see are one-time.
Butler.
Yes.
So you've got $50,000 there projected all the way out to 33, but you say those are increasing. But you didn't reflect the increases. Can you explain?
Mr. Chairman, it is something that we're starting to look at now. What you will see is in those one-time costs, we do have a line for proposed customizations for budget fiscal year 27. So these are the ones that we have currently. Those are the ones that we have a list of wants that we've had from various users of our systems and have requested estimates from our vendors, and that $529,000 is the current list. So I think the hope was once we get this big chunk of customizations out of the way, maybe we won't need so many in the next few biennia. I can't promise that, but that is something that we're definitely looking at, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Butler, when you say that you have users who have wants, could you give us some kind of examples on what kind of customizations we're talking about and who are the users that are asking for these?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lee, absolutely I can. And I'll just start with the kinds of users of our systems. So the case management system is used primarily by judges and clerks. And so if we have customizations to the case management system, those are usually requests by the clerks themselves, clerks of district court, circuit court clerks, chancery court clerk, because they have specific work processes that maybe the system does not accommodate. So that's one I'll move on to e-filing. E-filing is the second system that we get a lot of customization requests for. Those, again, some are clerk requests because they have to work in that e-filing system as well. Some are judicial requests because the system right now as it operates does not operate well for judges. It's very clunky and easy to make mistakes. And then the third user group there right now is attorneys. And so there are a few requests from attorneys, and I'll give you what I think is a pretty good example on the attorney side. The system today does not accommodate what we see a lot in Wyoming because we're so small, and that is attorneys who wear multiple hats. So you'll have an attorney who is in private practice, who also contracts with the public defender's office or contracts with the county attorney's office. And that system will only allow you to be a part of one firm. So you either get to be part of your private firm, or you get to be part of the county attorney's firm, or you get to be part of the public defender's firm. You don't get to be in all three. You can only be in one. And so that creates a lot of logistical problems for those attorneys when they're filing as the county attorney as opposed to their private practice. So that's one of the items that we have in that list, is to allow attorneys to be able to play those dual roles when they're filing rather than just that one role, which makes sense when the system is made for most of the United States. I don't want to say it's a unique problem to Wyoming, but because we don't have very many attorneys and because we are a small state with a small population, as you all know, as a citizen legislature, you have to wear many, many hats. And that's the same is true for our attorneys. So that's one example. All right, Mr. Chairman. So moving down to the one-time costs, you'll see we have the courtroom technology update. That is the biggest cost that we have this biennium, and it is a good chunk of change. Originally, we had hoped to kind of divvy that up over multiple years. And what we've seen with our current vendor is that the system, at least the video system that we use in our courtrooms, is going to be end of life in the next couple of years, by the end of 28, I believe. End of 27, early 28. And so what we're looking at now is we have to, in order to maintain the current functionality of courtroom technology that we have right now, we have to replace that in every single court in the state. And so that is the big the big lift that we have over the next few years is to continue to maintain the ability for people to appear remotely. And because we cannot kind of spread that out over time anymore, we're having to do it in one big chunk. When we originally implemented courtroom technology here in Wyoming, at least the robust system that we have today, we got funding from, we got COVID funds to do the vast majority of that. So that those COVID funds that we used initially are now being shifted into that JSA account in order to, for us to maintain that.
And Ms. Butler, that 6.8, was that part of your funding that you received this year? Or is that an ask for the future?
Mr. Chairman, that's not an ask for the future, and it's not part of the funding. That is, and I shouldn't say it's not. It's not something we haven't decided if we're going to make any, what kind of budget requests we're going to make in the coming years in terms of technology. But the idea based on the statute is that this funding would come out of that Judicial Systems Automation Fund rather than out of the general fund. The next item down you'll see is a branch-wide computer update. Again, this is just ensuring that our computers are up to date, that we've got, that they're supported and cybersecurity is all up to date. So that is a refresh for the entire branch. We talked about the proposed customizations line item. And then the last one is, I talked about the fact that we have a jury management system that is used in the clerk's offices throughout the state and used by jurors. That system is becoming quite old, and we anticipate that it will reach its end of life in the next few years. So that is a system that we anticipate we will be looking at potentially be replacing in the next few years. So Mr. Chairman, all of that, this adds up to show essentially what we're looking at in terms of spending and how much we have, and what you'll see at the ending fund balance for this biennium, if we use all of that money, will be about 1.5 million. It seems like a fair amount of money, but we really have looked at what kind of reserve we should keep, a minimum reserve that we should keep in that account. We'd be much more comfortable if we had about 1.8 million a year. And the reason for that is because a couple of things. One, we have salaries and benefits in that JSA account. So if we get below a certain amount, we're going to start to lose people, which we really cannot afford to do. And then the second piece of this is, as we've seen with courtroom technology, emergencies arise pretty regularly with technology. And so having some kind of reserve to be able to cover those emergencies that come up is incredibly important. So what you'll see moving out to budget fiscal year 31 is that if we don't receive any relief in that JSA fund, we'll be starting to hit the red in the next few years, or in the next few biennia. What we are doing right now as a branch is we're starting to really, we're not starting, we've been looking at this for quite some time, but we are now at the point where we're looking at potentially cutting some of these out of our budget, just because we know that we need to keep some kind of reserve and ensuring that we maintain that JSA fund is very important moving forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any other questions about that. Yeah.
Can you explain to the committee how the general fund appropriation this year factored in? Because it seemed to me you were going to be in the red by fiscal 31 before the funding was approved this year. So did that meet any of these needs or costs so that that's less likely to occur, or just explain that to me?
Mr. Chairman, it's a very good question. So the other thing that the JSA fund unfortunately has come to do over time is it's become a spillover from that general fund. So the items that we have in our general fund appropriation, if we haven't had enough money, and historically we haven't, if we don't have enough money in that general fund appropriation, there are some baseline things that we have to have. Cybersecurity, Microsoft licensing, those things keep the lights on. And if we don't have enough money in the general fund to pay for those spill over into our JSA, and we pay for that out of the JSA fund. What happened this year with the general fund is because we got that appropriation, that spillover that we anticipated was going to happen is no longer going to happen. So our projections changed a bit. So it bought us a little bit of extra time in that JSA fund. Okay, Mr. Chairman, just moving on, I just wanted to, I think I've had a couple of questions over the last year and even over the last couple of years. And people have been surprised by where we're at with the JSA fund. And so I just wanted to provide a little bit of a reminder. We have actually talked to the legislature quite a bit about this in previous biennia when we're doing our budget requests. And then as you all know, we've made a few requests of this committee. In 2025, there was a bill that came out of this committee to increase the court automation fee. That bill was not considered for introduction. And then just during this last budget session, there was a bill to essentially move the authority to set the fee from the legislature to the judicial branch. So in other words, it provided some language that essentially said, you know, judicial branch, you can set the fee at the costs that you need to support technology for the branch, with the understanding that, you know, you can't raise the fee so much that it's going to be outsized for your costs. And so there were some safeguards around that in the language itself. And then also we, out of the JSA fund, we actually have to ask for spending authority, even though it's designated for technology for the judicial branch. It's not automatic that we get that funding. We have to ask for spending authority every biennium. So this, that most recent bill also failed introduction in the Senate. So and this is a conversation we've been having for a while now. And we're hoping to continue that conversation moving forward. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for funding. Are there any questions?
Ms. Butler, yeah, just thinking of things that this committee can do. It seems to me like the two big pieces to solving or helping, I don't know if it solves your financial problem, but helping your financial problem. One is moving the employees out of the JSA and putting them under the general fund, which is something you could do on your own as long as you could secure the appropriation to cover them. But it's also something this committee could do. And then the second thing would be the funding source itself. You pointed out the two last attempts at adjusting the funding source. I see that as something this committee could do to help alleviate the stress on the JSA. Are there any other, maybe I'm getting ahead of the presentation, no? Are there any other things that you can think of aside from just an appropriation that we can do to help alleviate the stress on that account?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, honestly, I think those are the two big items that we have discussed, both within the branch and with legislators over time. So I can't think of any others. There may be some very creative way to solve that problem, but those are the two big ones. I would agree.
Ms. Butler, are you familiar with any states that maybe have their public access by subscription? And can that become a revenue stream?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there are a number of states that do have the revenue stream from the subscription service. We would have to dig into that a little more to see how much revenue that actually generates. I think often we anticipate that the revenue generated from something like that would cover more than just the cost of the system. But by and large, that revenue covers the cost of the system itself. So, I mean, it would be a way to cover the public access system, but maybe not much more than that.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just backtrack a little bit on the technology fee that you charge. I mean, just listening to this conversation or looking at the documents, you're not charging enough. I mean, to be frank about it. So I guess on that respect, on a technology fee increase, what would you think you'd have to do to cover these costs, to cover that? I mean, besides asking for under general appropriation, but just what could you do? I just always assumed that technology fee was supposed to cover this kind of thing into the future. And could you help me out with understanding why we're so far away from where we need to be? Thank you.
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Co-Chairman, Senator Kolb's agreed. We are, So the fee is statutory. Right now, it's $40 for most filings, most cases. There are exceptions to that. It's higher in Chancery Court. It's also higher when you file an appeal with the Supreme Court. In order to increase that fee, we have to come to you and get that fee increased. I would say, to get some, I don't want to say long-term sustainability, but definitely some short-term sustainability would be an increase in the realm of $15 to $20 would be incredibly helpful. Yeah, but I mean, it will go up over time. Likely, it will likely go up over time because the cost of technology increases over time.
Mr. Vice Chair.
I was just gonna follow up for Senator Kolb's edification because you only got to hear 1 minute of the last bill that was introduced because of the budget session introduction, but there was some explanation of that bill, but that's an alternative way of thinking about the fee, is just allowing, instead of us, we've upped that fee many times, and instead of us dealing with that fee every other session, the alternative would be, and this is something this committee could do, is to allow the court to set its own fee wherever it needs.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with that. Unfortunately, we didn't debate that, didn't make it. But I'm just listening to this, and you can't get here from there. You know, frankly, you're right. I 100% agree with you. If technology only goes up, nothing gets cheaper. IT is the most growing cost that everybody faces. So I think we do have to have a long-term. It's a partnership, you know, with you folks, and so your information's vital about what it's going to take. So the percentage was exactly what I asked for. Where do you think, and maybe you have to do better analysis on it, or maybe think about it a little bit more, because we need that data from you. So thank you for your help, though.
Ms. Butler.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, I do think we have those numbers, and I can pull them up a little later and make sure that we get you those.
Yeah, please continue.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So moving into existing court accessibility. So what we have here is just some information about what members of the public and litigants, individuals can access and where they can access it. I can tell you today, the best place to access documents, listen to hearings or proceedings, trials, anything like that is at your local courthouse. That is the best place to access anything. Well, I shouldn't say anything. Most things that people want to see that are happening in the courts. Also, the ability to see judges in action and see what they do, which I think is incredibly useful for people to understand. So obviously, that first page just gives you some information about where you can access that information. And then the second page talks about what kind of information is available at the courthouse. So we talked a little bit. Well, let's start with hearings, trials, and oral arguments, which we call proceedings. So most of our proceedings are open to the public unless they're made confidential by state statute, court rule, or some court order. So if anybody walks into a courthouse and wants to go watch a hearing, they are more than welcome to do that. And there are some limits, obviously, depending on the courthouse in terms of security and other things. But the vast majority of the proceedings in our trial courts and at the Supreme Court are open to the public and available for folks to watch. We talked a little bit about public access terminals. We have a public access terminal at every courthouse in the state. You can go to that public access terminal and you can search records statewide. Again, there are limitations in terms of confidential documents, confidential cases. You cannot find those on those public access terminals, but they do provide access to public documents and some data. So things like the litigant's name, who's representing them, if they have an attorney, the judge assigned to the case. That kind of information is also available on those public access terminals. We do get a fair amount of use, and I know you're going to hear from the clerks of district court, I think, later today. And what I can tell you, in some locations, those public access terminals are used all of the time by people who are doing research on all sorts of different things. So it is a very, very useful tool to understand what's happening in the courts.
Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Butler, can you tell me, is there a certain time frame for court documents to be put onto those so that individuals can access them? A week, 10 days, 30 days, 6 months?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, that system, that public access system gets updated every night. So if a document is processed during the day today, tomorrow it will be on the public access terminal.
Please continue.
All right. The other thing that I might just mention is that at times there are, the courts do stream some proceedings. And so there is the ability to access. The Supreme Court is a really good example of this. Their oral arguments, unless it's made confidential, are streamed. And so every month they're having oral arguments this week. So every month those oral arguments are streamed online, and people can listen to those. And that is true in many of our trial courts throughout the state as well.
Ms. Butler, how would a member of the public know if a particular case was going to be available for streaming? By streaming, you mean on YouTube like our proceedings are, or how are they streamed?
Mr. Chairman, those are all streamed through. You would have to go to our judicial branch website, and there is a link that people can click to see if a hearing is streamed. And honestly, I don't think there's any notice beforehand about whether or not a hearing or a proceeding is going to be streamed. I can tell you if any member of the public had an interest in a hearing or proceeding that they wanted to listen to, they could contact the judge's chambers to determine if that hearing was going to be streamed. As
Representative Chestic.
Are those streams archived so you can go look at them after the fact?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Chestic, they are not archived in a place where the public can get them. We do have recordings because we don't have court reporters at the circuit court level. We do have recordings of those hearings. I can tell you they are housed on a file share on our network. And so finding a specific hearing would be really, really challenging if you didn't know exactly what you were looking for. So no, we don't have the public facing ability to provide recorded hearings. We do provide those if we get a request though. So at the circuit court level, if we get a request from someone who says, I want this hearing, that will be, the clerk will find it in their file share and record it and give it to whoever's requesting. I think it's a $5 fee.
Thank you. Representative Webb.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, you've mentioned the word confidential or twice.
Mhm.
And so I'm wondering, what are the stipulations between when a file or a case or proceeding, whatever is marked to be confidential? Can the attorney just say, I want this one confidential at a whim, or is it just strictly things for like juvenile cases, et cetera?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, I would say generally, generally no. An attorney can't just mark something as confidential. We have a couple of different things available. Obviously, anything that's set forth by state statute as confidential is going to remain confidential. Juvenile cases are a very good example of that. We also have what we call it the security matrix that the judicial branch has developed. And essentially, it is a matrix of all of the statutes and court rules that I'm sure we missed some, that we can find. And then it sets forth the level of access that each document is defined to have. So there are some documents, obviously juvenile cases, again, very good example, where the documents are available to the parties on the case, but they're not available to the public. And so it defines those different levels of access. And so pursuant to court rule, if there is a document that an attorney deems to be confidential, generally it's going to need to be in line with that security matrix to ensure that it's the appropriate level of confidentiality. I do know that is and again, you'll hear from the clerks and they know this much better than I. That is a challenge. Absolutely. As a clerk, it is something that I think they deal with on a regular basis is people either not marking something that is confidential that should be, or marking something confidential that shouldn't be. And so that is something that the clerks deal with and the judges for sure deal with.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the lines of his question, of Representative Webb's question, do you have documents that are currently updated that have redacted information in them, such as dates of birth?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, we do. The court rules require redaction of specific information, full dates of birth, social security numbers, account numbers, those kinds of things. The rules also require that if an attorney is filing a redacted document, they have to file an unredacted document, and then that document is made confidential. So the redacted document would be available to the public. The unredacted document would not.
Representative Brady.
Thank you. What was asked earlier about archiving the procedure or whatever, why are they not archived?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Brady, I may have misspoke. I don't want to give you the impression that we don't have recordings of the hearings that we are required to. So again, at the circuit court level, because we don't have court reporters, as a court of record, their record is that recording. So that recording exists for a certain period of time until it's archived. It's just not available to the public. And the answer to why is truly that it is a monumental lift to try to get that done. We would need probably a new system, and we would also need somebody with the ability to manage the organization of those hearings. Likely lots of training for the circuit court clerks to record in the ways that could make those searchable and able to be found. And so that really is the sole purpose. And I would say, again, those recordings are available. If somebody calls and asks the court at the circuit court level, you can get that recording. You just have to call and ask and pay a fee.
Judge Chambers, maybe you could give us a sense of the volume of cases in circuit court that are recorded every day. So we get an idea of what that lift might look like to archive and make forward facing all that material.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Just as an example, here in Laramie County, there are 3 of us circuit judges, and all 3 of us are in court morning and afternoon, 5 days a week. And the current recording system we use, Liberty Player, I think it's called. It's how I would describe it is it's the digital equivalent of when you go in the courtroom at 9, the digital equivalent of hitting record, and when you walk out of the courtroom at 11:30, the digital equivalent of hitting stop. And so it basically records anytime you're in the courtroom from 9 to 11:30 or from 1 in the afternoon till close of business. And the clerks are trained as hearings change. So let's say I might have 5 arraignments during a half hour. As each arraignment changes, they're trained to make digital equivalent of marks on that digital recording that shows when that case comes up. And then for each day, AM and PM, that recording is housed whatever on a server or someplace. And so even for me or somebody that has access to that in behind the counter, so to speak, it can be difficult to go unless you know what day it was, and unless you know that it was morning or afternoon, and unless you know which of 3 courtrooms it took place in. It's difficult to go in and say, oh yeah, here's courtroom A, 10:30 on Monday, May whatever. I can find the arraignment for State versus Jones, unless I know that information. If I don't know that information, if all I know is the name, if all I know is the courtroom, if all I know is the date, it's going to take some time to go through and find that State versus Jones. Everything, every minute, every moment that the judge is in the courtroom and is on the record, it's being recorded. But as a matter of practice, to find a specific recording for a specific proceeding, it's
That sounds
not
like
set up
more
that
than
way.
$5 worth of work to locate.
Yes.
Representative Shestak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm a lawyer who's tried a case, got a verdict. I didn't like the verdict, so I'm filing an appeal. The record of the case now is a video recording. How do I cite that record? Is there some transcription program that you can use to send the record up to the Supreme Court, or I've never heard of a trial with no court reporter, I guess is the problem. I'm an old lawyer.
Yeah, in circuit court, maybe municipal courts, that's the way it is. Yeah, Judge.
Chairman, Mr. Representative Chestick, for circuit court, the record is the recording. And so it's the recording that is transmitted to the district court for appeal. It's however it's transmitted. I don't know if it's by flash drive or CD or whatever it is, but the actual recording is then transmitted to the district court for appeal. District courts work different, obviously, because each district court judge has a court reporter, and proceedings are, not all proceedings, most proceedings are transcribed.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that explanation. Could you tell me, are the proceedings, how are they archived in other states? Are you familiar with what any other state is doing for archives for the court records?
Ms. Butler, any idea?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, honestly, I am not sure. I think that's something we could dig into, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Representative Brady.
Thanks. This is just a follow-up to my earlier question. When you said the public can request, is it advertised anywhere on your website that the public can request these
Ms. Butler.
files?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brady, I don't believe we have any language to that effect. But it's not outside the realm of possibility that we could add it.
Please continue.
All right. So, Mr. Chairman, I thought we would just go through a little bit of information about what it takes essentially for our team to implement a new system. And we talked a little bit about this morning, and I think it was, I hope we showed you that it's not a short time. We generally can't implement a brand new enterprise system in the branch in less than a few years. Most of our systems take 3 to 7 years to implement fully across all jurisdictions. So this is something that is a long-term process, looking at new systems that we can put in place. So the first step obviously is procurement. So procuring a vendor, there are a number of different things that we look at. What's the primary purpose of the system? What kind of minimum requirements do we want that system to have? We have to identify vendors and contractors in that space. I can tell you that there are actually not that many contractors or vendors who do court work, state court work in the United States. It's pretty limited, which I know sounds surprising, but it's about a handful. So there's not a lot of competition in that field. We usually go through some kind of demonstration. So the vendors come in, we kind of look at who we think would be good and ask them to come in and provide demonstrations. And then we always do kind of reference checks, check with other states to determine what kind of experiences they have had with those vendors. So it's a pretty darn robust procurement system. I will tell you, we've had some bad experiences with vendors in the past. So that is something that we really try to avoid when we procure new systems, and something that we're very cognizant of as we move forward. So the next step really is, I talk about implementation, but implementation kind of gives you the impression that we're actually rolling the system out. There's a whole lot of work that goes into that system before we roll it out. First of all, we have to have funding. We usually work with a committee of some sort to help us do configuration work. So As I mentioned, the systems are usually off-the-shelf systems, and then our software applications team will dig into that system and they'll configure the system in a way that works for us. And so there's a lot of work that's put in and a lot of decisions that have to be made, and most of those decisions are made through a committee of stakeholders. Most of the time, and this would be true of a remote public access system, there's some kind of integration that needs to happen with another system. I would say this is one of the most challenging parts of what we do because we contract with multiple vendors. Those two vendors have to be able to integrate their two systems. That is super challenging sometimes. And so the same would be true for a remote public access system. It would have to integrate with the case management system or integrate with our database to ensure that we get information into that public access system. We do quite a bit of testing. We work extensively with the courts and the clerk's offices. We provide quite a bit of training as we roll out these systems to ensure that we're trying to cover all our bases and make sure everybody knows how to use them. We often pilot in a court before we go live everywhere. So that'll take a while to pilot, look at what are the problems, what are some of the solutions, and then we do full rollout or full implementation. And then often we're doing a lot of follow-up thereafter. I say this actually, I think we're in the middle of e-filing rollout in circuit courts right now. We have a kickoff call right now with every circuit court that we're going live in. And I say it at every meeting, and that is, there is no such thing as a perfect rollout ever. I've never had one. I've done a lot of these. There are always challenges. There are always issues that we have to work through. There are always policy questions that we didn't think about before we implemented. And so that follow-up becomes really important.
Senator Kriegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Butler, at the top, we see the word funding. I mean, do we have any idea, and I know this is all going to depend on what this, what kind of system we create or don't, but do we have any idea what it would cost? I mean, what's the initial upfront cost look like? What's the continuing cost look like for not only the state court system, but also our county clerks, our county commissioners, as they have to fund some of this? Do we have any ideas?
Something in the ballpark?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kriegel, I mean, I can give you a ballpark, but it is definitely not something that I would like you to use frequently because we don't know. Based on previous systems, I would say ranging from $250,000 to up to, I don't know, $600,000 for the first implementation. And then we have an ongoing cost. And I don't know what that ongoing cost would be. That all depends on whether or not that system would be hosted by the vendor that we choose. That always costs more in terms of the cloud storage and things like that. So and again, I would say that is a very wild guess. One of the things that we are looking at doing is potentially looking at an RFI. So just a request for information to get more information about what could be the costs of a system like that. I don't know a very good estimate, honestly.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we know how much we've spent on e-filing in our case management system just over the last decade?
I
Ms.
do,
Butler.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, Senator Kriegel, we do know. I don't have that number at my fingertips, but I can get it for you. A lot.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the millions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kriegel, yes, definitely.
Multi-millions.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kriegel, I would anticipate that's true. Yes.
So when you're saying 600,000, that's not total package price. That it seems to me that's exceedingly low. When you said 250 to 600,000, what's in there and what's not in that estimate? Obviously, it's a ballpark.
Mr. Chairman, I think I gave you a big range because it all depends on what the system does. And so on the lower end, it would be what I would anticipate is a fairly rudimentary system with not a lot of bells and whistles. On the higher end, you'd be looking at something much more robust. I can tell you it very well could be more the more things that we add into a remote public access system, so documents or hearings or whatever else, that cost will go up exponentially just because of the amount of functionality that's required, but then also the amount of storage that's required. For instance, we have multiple documents in multiple places of the same document, duplicates in multiple places because of all of those systems. So every time you have a duplicate document, it increases your storage cost. And that would likely be true of a public access system as well.
So that's basically the software cost. Doesn't include personnel training costs, integration costs. So that's just for the software, right? Basically for the 600,000.
Mr. Chairman, it would be for the initial build of that likely. And then over time, we would have maintenance and support on top of that, usually annually.
No money comes in. Mr. Craigle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sorry to keep pestering you, Ms. Butler, but I mean, I'm just going back, our annual costs, I mean, our biennial costs for software applications of the current system is about 2.4, 2.5. We have it projected to four budget cycles from now to be at 3.3 million per cycle per budget. So we're talking, we're going anywhere from 1.2, 1.3 per year for our current applications. And I mean, depending on, I guess, how we do this, but if we're talking about every document that's already on the system, if that's what the goal is, which that would not be my goal, but assuming that is, I mean, we're going to have a mirror system to some degree. It's going to have to be a mirror system of our other system, right? Because it can't be the same. So we're going to have a mirror system. I don't know how in the world we get it done for 600,000. I'm skeptical of that number, that it's possible to do anything of what some folks are going to want to do for 600,000. Now, if we're just selecting certain documents to post somewhere, that's a different story. But sorry, what do you think about that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Craig, again, I think I don't disagree with you. I think the cost that we're going to be looking at, especially when we're mirroring a system, is the storage costs. And I think the cost that I'm looking at is truly just for the initial, here's your software and this initial purchase, essentially. So we have the initial costs, and then we have on top of that maintenance and support, which often includes things like storage costs, which is honestly builds up very quickly when you mirror those two systems, especially when it comes to documents. So yes, I think the cost will be substantial. And if, this body wants to give us $2 million to do it, that would be great, I guess. Again, I think the question comes back to, what do you want? What do we want the system to do? What should it look like? And what does that implementation look like? And really, the careful consideration of that is the big piece more than anything else. I think the cost we can find out, but it's all dependent on what the system does in the end.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Butler, so maybe I don't fully understand the technology, but I'm thinking of the terminals, the terminals that exist in every courthouse, and that has a storage of documents that I assume is on a server, not on that individual terminal. So why is it so complicated when we already have a server in every single courthouse storing public documents? Are we not able to just give a remote access to those terminals?
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Olson, we are not. So the documents are not stored in a server at each location, and they're stored in the cloud. By us. The big problem with transitioning our current public access system that are on our terminals to a remote public access system is that system, this is one of our exceptions, was built in-house, and it was not built to be that kind of public facing. The public access system now lives on our network. There are a lot of firewalls around it. There's a lot of security around it. And when you think about the number of people accessing that system at any one time right now, pretty limited, probably less than 100 at any given time, even when it's being used the most. If you make that a public-facing access system, exponential use, much more use than what we would be accustomed to. So it's just not built to handle that kind of load. And honestly, I would be very hesitant for us to build a public access system in-house. We have a really phenomenal developer, but we have one developer for our branch of government. And so what she does in terms of building software is pretty limited based on what she can do with her time.
Representative Lean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Butler. I don't want to say I'm hearing excuses, but I just keep hearing excuses. In today's world of technology, I understand that there is always a security risk, but if we're daily redacting documents and daily uploading to this server, is there an IT person that we could contract to put with the courts for a nominal fee to be able to make this accessible for the individuals in Wyoming to access court records? I understand that you keep saying, you have just said that you expect a lot more use, and that tells me that the people are wanting access to these documents. The courts are supposed to be open to the citizens per Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And so in giving the ability for people that want to access different court records for whatever their purpose is, to be able to access them in today's world of IT, is there an appropriate appropriation that we could give to the courts to open the court documents, to take the current cloud or server and turn that into a public-facing technology that the people could access in the state of Wyoming?
Ms. Butler, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, I want to make just one thing pretty clear, because I think the assumption is that the access that people will be using our remote public access system for are individual users. What we're seeing, especially in other states, is the people or the entities that are using those systems the most are not individual entities. They are people who are data mining, data scraping. They are going through every document to try to find the information that they want or need. And sometimes they use it for nefarious purposes. And so that is probably the biggest concern that we have about making something as simple as our public pass system a public-facing system, is we have no mechanism to prevent that kind of data scraping. As I said, it's a security risk, but it's also just a risk for the system itself. It likely would overload that system and it would crash. So then if you are just an individual member of the public and you wanted to access it, you couldn't, because it's getting hit with data miners and data scrapers. I think that is the biggest concern about using a system that is not robust in terms of especially security and what it will prevent and what it does not prevent. So I can, and as I mentioned before, Mr. Chairman and Representative Lean, I gave a guess, a very clear guess on the number of what it would cost. And that is something that we'll look into further moving forward if that's something this committee is looking for.
So I think it's important for us to recognize that this committee needs to come up with basically a plan of what we expect public access to be. And then there will be another process through the Appropriations Committee where the branch will say, in order to deliver what the Judiciary Committee wants in terms of public access to these court records, this is what we anticipate the cost would be. Is that a fair characterization of how this is going to progress?
Mr. Chairman, I think that is a fair characterization. And just the only thing that I would add to that is I think that whatever that decision in terms of what it should look like, and as you all do, it would need to be a very clear collaboration between the judges and the clerks and the people who actually see the documents that come through the courts, and, you know, making some of those very big policy decisions about what should be available on a remote public access system and what should not. And I think you heard Mr. Shanae talk earlier about how there are definitely some states who divide what's available. Something that's available at the courthouses is not necessarily available through a remote public access system. And I think that's done very consciously in terms of what you should be able to access from your home and what you maybe have to work a little bit harder to access.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Butler, I think maybe in the future, we can be more accurate on some of these limitations, or because I can assure you with data terminals, you can throttle the data terminal. It is not a mystery. They can control the data output. So what you're saying won't happen, deliberately so, right? There's ways of doing it. They don't have open access. It's not wide open throttle. It's common in the industry to do that. So that won't happen because it can take a whole system down. I guess my ask would be, need to know the sideboards to this a little more accurately. You know, like what do we have to work with when the ask is made for money or, you know, a bill to do a certain thing, need to know what that thing is. Right now, I know, I agree with you. It's ever increasing, but numbers that are going to actually drive the solution, right? Need to have something that's more tangible. I mean, I'm not hearing like, this is the way it is. So if you could come back maybe with some more hard data, find another developer. I don't know what to say, but there are people very capable out there in the world that do this for a living and for the very thing you're trying to protect. So I think there are resources out there to do this, but need a number, need to know, like, you know, you say, what is it really going to look like? And I respectfully just, could you maybe, I would certainly like to know more as a member and trying to make a decision for you that helps out the public. Need to know, it would be very helpful to know more. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, we can definitely bring that information back. I think one of the things that we've struggled with as well is, again, the question we've asked this morning and then asked again this afternoon is, what is remote public access and what does it include? And that, I mean, we can bring back numbers on what we know vendors and contractors can provide, whether or not it meets with what this committee believes public access should include. I can't tell you the answer to that. But yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, happy to bring back more information at the next meeting.
I'd be curious, whichever state maybe did this most recently, what they spent on the effort. Because I think that's where I was thinking about the subscription cost. I think that one of the ways to control the data mining and still make the project available to the people of Wyoming is to charge a one-time user fee. Because most people in Wyoming only want to find one record, you know, on one case. Data mining want daily access to everything. And so there may be mechanisms in place that would serve the needs of the people of Wyoming and the litigants and their counsel without, you know, subjecting us to, you know, data miners crashing our system or, you know, and I don't know enough about the technology, but what I hear from you is you're asking us to help define what is public access for Wyoming. What do we as a committee want in terms of access, or help define that at least? And what is it not? You know, is it just limited access to certain types of things? Is it wide open access on the internet? Is it subscription only? So is that right? What are you asking us to provide you with regards to public access? What's your need for this committee to work on over this interim?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be helpful to provide definitely some guardrails on what remote public access should look like. I think what I recognize will need to happen over time is a lot of work digging into specific issues. And so whether or not this committee has the time or inclination to delve into those kinds of issues, I don't know. But I think broad guardrails would be useful for us to determine how to get the numbers that we need to make a request for the money that we need to implement something like a remote public access. That would be helpful in terms of moving it forward.
I think it's fair. My guess is that we're not interested in facilitating data mining. What we're interested in is meeting the needs of the people of Wyoming in terms of access to the courts and the information. So we'll have to talk about that as a committee. How do we want to define this, and what is the end product that we would like public access to be for Wyoming? Okay. So please continue. Oh, Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe to put a finer point on that, what are your guardrails? I think for me, what is able to be given to the public legally? And that, I think, is a good starting point. So I guess if you could help out those sideboards, what can the public see legally? What are those? What's the expanse? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Butler.
Mr. Chairman, I think maybe I don't want to take up too much more time because I know you have other people to talk to here today. So I think we've kind of gone through a little bit of the discussion on what does remote public access mean. We listed a few policy considerations here, and I think we've talked about a number of these, right? Whether or not there should be a payment model, is it free, subscription, pay to access? What does that look like? As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of different models. You could pay per document. You could get a subscription. There's a lot of different ways to approach that. I mean, it could be free. I don't know that, again, policy-wise, I think that that's a decision probably for this body. There are some states, I believe, that don't require people to register to use the public access system. There's some danger to that, I believe, but that is definitely a model that could be used. Looking at the privacy risks, we know there are some, and again, I think you'll hear those primarily from the judges and the clerks here today. We talked a little bit about some of the cybersecurity risks, talked about data miners and scrapers, and then the last one, I think, is one that is really important to keep in mind. And I was talking to Judge Chambers this morning. He had a really good thing to say, which is E does not mean easy. So just because things are made electronic does not mean that there's less work involved. There are people that have to keep that system up and running. There's money involved over time. And so, we don't actually know if there's going to be an additional burden on clerks, on judges, on definitely on our staff, or if more people are going to be needed to ensure that that system can be maintained. So that's definitely a policy consideration moving forward. I think, again, the rest of this, I think we have kind of hit on as we've gone through this discussion. So, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to just hand it over to Judge Chamber and Judge Snyder's just to talk about their perspectives from the bench and what they're seeing and some of the things that they would like to discuss with you here today.
Appreciate that. We're at 2:50, which was the time when we had set for this discussion, and we're nowhere close to being finished. We got several people yet, I think, that want to talk about this. So open to hearing what the judges have to provide for us.
Mr. Chairman, I had notes on a few different things about who I see uses our remote and public access tools, sort of what that looks like in practice, how these implementation of these types of things impacts court personnel, my clerks, how it impacts their jobs. my spiel about just because you put E in front of something doesn't make it easy. I had notes about all of those things. And I'm happy to talk about all of those things, but really as the conversation progressed and we're trying to hone in on what it is we mean by public access and what it is you want, I would invite you all to go out and look at different states that have implemented different things. And I have limited experience with what is out there. I'm generally familiar with the federal court's PACER system. You have to have an account. I believe that costs money to have an account, to log on and have free access to the federal court's PACER system. And once you're in, it's been so long since I used PACER. I don't know what it looks like now, but I think once you're in, basically you can, look for, search any type of cases, and the cases that are public according to whatever federal law, I think they're available. I've had occasion to look at Colorado courts. I found Colorado courts to be a little bit cumbersome. Just as an example, one of the things I was trying to find was a proceeding that involved litigants that I had in my court. It was in Larimer County. And one of the things I came across is you had to know which courthouse in Larimer County it occurred in. And I think there are courthouses in, I think it's Fort Collins, Loveland, and Estes Park. And you had to know which courthouse it was in order to hone in on that. And then just the sort of search parameters. You had to be fairly adept at internet searching and sort of the advanced search types of things in order to get to anything that you wanted in Colorado. And my recollection is that the records that were available only went back about 30 days. And so you had to be within a pretty close time frame in order to access those things. Another occasion I had to look at records from Florida courts. It was interesting how what I found in Florida, there was interaction between arrest records, detention center records and things on the county level, and how those interacted and were available or cross-referenced with Florida court records. And just as an example, in Florida, you could pull up through the various county sheriff's departments, you'd be able to pull up mugshots, arrest records, fairly, I think by most of our understanding, most of the conversation we've had was fairly comprehensive information on a given person or a given record. And then once you went over to the court record side of that, you essentially were able to pull up a complete docket of the things that were filed, but only select kinds of those records were actually available, for click download. And I could look at a charging document or could look at whatever it is and say, just as an example, out of 10 pleadings listed under a particular criminal docket, there may only be 2 or 3 or 4 of those pleadings that were available. So the point I'm making is that in looking at what public access there is out there for the courts, there's tremendous variation just using those 3 examples and what it really looks like and how comprehensive it is, how limited it is. I'm sure that behind the scenes, there have been policy considerations in terms of what is going to be available through that. Things that we're just beginning to scratch the surface on here.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Snyder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. On behalf of the district judges, I would ask you to be very deliberate and very conscientious about any decisions you make about public access. There is public access. It's at the courthouse. You go to the clerk's counter and you get access to any file that's not confidential. You can come watch any court proceeding that's not confidential. These are real people's lives that we deal with, particularly in district court. I think at least half of what we deal with involve families and children, people who die, their probates, their money. They're very sensitive issues. And so when you're looking at public access, are we doing it because there is a demand from our public, or are we doing it because it's convenient, we're nosy, we like to get on the internet and look around? So be deliberate in whatever decision you make, because we do have access. We have open courtrooms. We welcome you anytime. But I think the litigants have the right to expect they know who's looking into their files and why people are looking into their records. And so as you make these decisions, don't make it just because it's easy. Don't make it just because it's the trend to go towards electronic records. Make it because it's what's best for the people who use the court system. It's best for the citizens of Wyoming.
Fair enough. Thank you all. I think we've got some more people on the agenda here that want to speak to us. I very much appreciate the in-depth coverage today, 'cause I think it's helping us frame what's ahead. Any concluding comments, Ms. Butler?
No, Mr. Chairman, just thank you for your time today.
Thank you. What's that? Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the judges and to Ms. Butler. My question is, while we're talking about open courts, we also talk about judges' retentions. And one question that I've had from several constituents is, where can I research the judges? How do I know if I want to retain them? So could you give me an example of where these folks might be able to go to be able to know, since if they don't have all day to go sit in a courthouse and read what a judge is deciding on different dockets, could you give me an example on where they might be able to go to research retention for judges?
Mr. Chairman?
Judge Snyder.
Thank you. Representative Lean, there is a biannual survey that's done by the Wyoming Bar Association, and those results are published. And so every 2 years, whether you're up for retention or not, the lawyers in the state do rate the attorneys. And that is a process that's continuously being refined, try to make it better and provide good insight. And those results are typically published across the state. The local newspapers for your jurisdiction usually pick up those results.
Do you know if the Wyoming Bar has it on their website? Is it all? I think their survey is usually on the website there too.
Mr. Chairman, it is, and I would be happy to provide you with the link to the most recent survey, although that's been a minute, so.
Sounds great. Okay, clerks, you've been waiting and waiting patiently back there. Good afternoon. So we have gobbled up much of our time this afternoon, so we're eager to hear what you have to say, but we'd like it with as much brevity as possible.
Awesome.
Please introduce yourselves for the record and tell us what we need to know about public access.
Okay, so I am Diane Sanchez, and I am the Clerk of District Court here in Laramie County. And so, Mr. Chairperson and Committee, we first off would like to thank you for inviting us to attend. As the statutory and constitutional custodian of the district court record, which includes a wide range of complex and sensitive case types, we are passionate about our duty to keep a complete and accurate record and to provide public access and proper protections where required. We have more than 100 years of experience with complex district court case records that include family law, such as parentage, custody, visitation and support, guardianship and conservatorships of minors, and incompetent adults. Minors charged in adult felony court with motions to transfer to juvenile court, trust administration, and litigation, adoption, involuntary hospitalizations, juvenile, criminal, and etc. We also have direct accountability pressures and responsibilities to our constituents. We are always striving to balance access, transparency, and proper protections. We respond to public access questions and needs on a daily basis. We are available to visit directly with the interested public and court partners. We are proud of how far we have come so quickly. The last 5 to 10 years has rapidly improved court records management and access, one statewide system, scanning, expanded public access terminals, email filings, and e-filing. We are pleased that the Wyoming Judicial Branch committees have already been working to lay necessary foundations and work with stakeholders on needs and options, meaning we are working on court rule reviews. Additional technology updates are in the works to better accommodate different levels of information access. And just for me to finish, I just want to remind you that we are county elected officials and our budgets come from our counties.
Mr. Chairman and members of the judiciary. Sorry.
Can you
got a
speak
little-
into your microphone a little bit?
Yeah.
Is the green light on?
It is.
All right, kind of lean into the mic so we can all hear you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the judiciary. I'm Amanda Sanchez. I am the clerk of district court in Fremont County. Ironically enough, Diane is not my mother, but we resemble each other, I think. Today we've come to you with the aspect of what is public access. And that's to be viewed in two different ways. Currently, we do have public access available, as the judicial branch had mentioned, through public access portals, through hearings being streamed online, through the documents at our counters, and the documents you can request from our offices. We know that this is an important step to the future of what our record looks like, but I think to begin with, we need to know what our record is. As Diane had pointed out, we have records dating back for 100 years. And we are in the midst of what we are moving from a paper record to an electronic record. And what I mean by that is not everything has been easy these last couple of years. From the beginning, it was easy to hand over a paper file and say, hey, this is your public record, and take out a confidential sleeve that we put in the center. That was something that by statute or rule was not to be seen by the public. So here's the file. Please review it. Let us know what you need. When we look at the electronic format of our record, we have to take into consideration that that's not just pulling a sleeve out anymore, and the proper safeties and protocols that we need to put in place. We spoke to some of the rule amendments and language changes in statutes that we've been looking at to ensure that that confidentiality is maintained. But one of the major aspects that we are also looking at is the systems that we're working with and what it looks like. When we look at our record is no longer just the view of the paper file. It's the view of what the judges see, what the clerks see, what an attorney can see, what our litigants can see, what a public person at the counter can see, what the Supreme Court sees, and what agencies see. There's multiple layers that go into this. Elisa earlier had talked about the security access matrix. And when we look at that security access matrix, it's not just, yes, I can see it, you can't. There are different members that are all intertwined inside of our world that need certain access levels. And how do we image that on the systems that we're currently working with? That has been one of the biggest hurdles that we're trying to still overcome. We know currently that File and Serve Express and Full Court Enterprises are two different systems that the clerks are working with. They don't necessarily talk to each other the same way. So when we talk about the $529,000 in customizations that we need, that's to make sure that this confidentiality is still maintained between the two systems, that is just between the clerks and attorneys. With those talking appropriately through some of the customizations, these goals can be met. But right now, as clerks, we feel that the record is a little bit unstable. And by unstable, I mean not that it's going to go anywhere, but we need some issues that are currently evolving from the e-filing world to be fixed and maintained before we feel it's safe enough to move to an online remote public access. But that's a question in itself. What does that online remote public access look like? We know as a truth and a fact that committees are essential in this world of our record. And it's our record. This is not my record. It's not Fremont County's record. This is the citizens' record. So we need to do that with tact and care. Having committees with multiple people involved, including judges, clerks, attorneys, people who are asking for these things is essential, because the way that I view it versus the way that someone else views it has complexities that no one else can see. And we've learned this through the implementation of the electronic record, that there were things that we didn't foresee coming until we were actually living in what we would call the swamp of everything. And they're coming to light. But there's still things that we do have concerns about, things that we feel need to be stabilized, and then we can move forward with this. The judicial branch in their efforts have been amazing at hearing us and saying, hey, please come sit at our tables with us. Please talk to us about this. Because as clerks, we typically sit in the background and we just make things function. But part of that functionality is figuring out now the policies and procedures to move forward with the implementations of things that have been set forth in the last couple of years. When we look at electronic filing, that's only been in the last 2 years that the district courts have actually been working with it. We're taking 100 years of tradition and what we knew and changing it to something that we need to ensure will succeed in the future and be available for people to come. I still currently file in records from 1917. That means that this record will be halfway paper, halfway electronic. And how do we make sure that that's appropriate? How do we make sure that that's there for people to still utilize and still be formative of? There were a couple of issues that were addressed earlier when we talk about redactions and confidentiality. While we know that redactions are a rule that's set out, we also need to make sure that people know what kind of records will be going out if they're going to go out. And by that, I mean, most of the people coming up to our counters are in a state of emergency. They're not there just as, oh, I would love to see Amanda today and get a divorce. They are wanting to get something done. And as pro se litigants move forward, we can tell them, hey, this will be a public record, but I don't think some people understand that right at that point. What we're asking is that we take care and ensure that what we're producing for the public is respectful to everyone involved, and not just for the wants of the world, but actually for the needs that we see for the record that we maintain. I think that's it. I would stand for questions.
So let me ask you a question. Would it be beneficial for the committee to, during our August meeting in Casper, go to the clerk's office and actually operate one of these terminals and see what things look like? My worry is that if all of us show up, we disrupt the workflow of the office, and the people that have business to take care of in your office are disrupted by a whole bunch of legislators trying to figure out what's what. But I also believe that most of us have never used one of these terminals. Most of us have no idea in our heads what we're contemplating here. And so I'm just wondering, do you think it would be beneficial for us to take such a tour? Could we maybe do it after hours so that we're not disrupting your clients? Or I see Jill back there nodding her head. Yes, I could. So what's your thought? Would it be valuable? Would it be something for us to learn by being there or not?
Chairman Washut, I definitely believe that that would be very beneficial for you to actually see what we are talking about. And looking at the Natrona Clerk of District Court, I think she can make those accommodations.
Questions? Representative Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wonder if it might be easier if we went to our respective counties and did that between now and August, rather than take 2 or 3 hours to go to the Natrona County clerk.
Feel free. Feel free. Any other questions for the clerks? Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the both clerks for coming today. My question is there a National Clerks Association that that you all might belong to? And the follow-up is, if there is, are there best practices that you can ask them about, or about other states and how they're, if they're being asked these same things, and if so, how are they implementing them?
Whichever one of you wants to field that one.
Chairman, to Senator Bratton. We do actually get ourselves involved with a conference called NACOM, and it's the National Association of Court Management. I personally have not been to one of their national conferences. However, several of the clerks of district court have been. And these are the questions that we ask. There are nuances, of course, that we know exist in Wyoming. We know that not having a unified court system, but having a unified court record, it is different. However, I don't think that that's something that is very much different across the United States. We do know that 31 states are unified and 25 states are not unified. So to see the different perspectives from different parts of the United States and what they've implemented and how it works contingently through their agencies, there will be nuances. However, they've been beneficial to the information that we've received in regards to things like a recycle bin. Currently, we don't have a recycle bin for our court record, which means if we delete something off of the system, it's gone forever. A lot of other states have indicated that that is something essential that Wyoming currently doesn't have and that we are looking into. Those are the things that would stabilize and help make sure that this goes forward.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Representative Bratton, or are you done?
No, thank you.
Okay. Others? All right. Thank you both very much. Sarah Davis from Wyoming State Archives on Zoom.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Sarah Davis, and I serve as the State Archivist for Wyoming, overseeing the Wyoming State Archives. There was a lot of questions earlier about archiving these type of records, so I just wanted to provide some guidance on this. The Wyoming State Archives is charged with ensuring long-term access to state records, supporting all levels of Wyoming government in that effort. This includes storing and preserving records from the courts across the state in a variety of formats, from paper, microfilm, microfiche, digital files, and physical case exhibits. Our staff brings specialized expertise in long-term records management and public access. While this proposal is directed primarily at the courts, I want the committee to be aware that will also have a direct fiscal impact on the Wyoming State Archives. I ask that this be taken into consideration as the proposal moves forward. I have several concerns that I would like the committee to consider moving forward, and they have been voiced by others during this meeting already. But specifically, the digitization timeline and deadlines. Digitization is a time and labor-intensive process. Any mandated deadlines must be realistic and adequately resourced. Disposition of original records. The proposal should clearly address what happens to the original physical records after digitization. Originals often retain legal and historical value and should not be disposed of without a clear policy. long-term access to records, whether records are maintained digitally or physically. A plan must exist to ensure that they remain accessible over time. Storage costs, which we talked about a lot already today. Both physical and digital storage space carry ongoing costs that must be accounted for in its budget. And digital preservation. Electronic records are among the most volatile record types. Unlike physical records, we can see physical deterioration, but the digital degradation is not visible to the naked eye and requires consistent technical monitoring to detect and prevent data loss. And data scraping and automated bots. Publicly accessible digital records must have protections in place to prevent misuse through automated data harvesting. The Wyoming State Archives is well positioned to support the courts in this work. We already administer the Wyoming Digital Archives, which provides long-term digital storage services for Wyoming government records. And we operate the State Imaging Center, which offers digitization services to state agencies. However, given the scope of work required, if we were to do the early records from the 1917, as discussed a little bit earlier today, this would require a heavy lift from the state archives. We would need a minimum of at least 2 additional digital archivists to support this effort adequately. So this proposal has a real potential to improve public access to court records, and I am committed to working collaboratively with the courts to help achieve that goal. I only ask that the committee ensure that the archives has the resources necessary to do this work well, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Davis. I'm always amazed at these hearings when you realize that how things that happen over here in government also impact other agencies of government that frankly, I never would have thought about the state archives in this discussion had you not shown up on our agenda today. So thank you for being here. Anyone with questions for the state archives? Ms. Davis, thank you for joining us. We'll keep you in mind.
Thank you.
Ross Schriftman online. Mr. Schriftman, we're over time for this afternoon, but please join in the conversation and keep it as brief as possible.
I will. Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. I am very much in support of expansion of remote access if possible. We do have a right to those public records, considering confidentiality. I have used the terminals at the Natrona County District Court, and the staff has been very helpful. But the problem is that if somebody really wants to look at something that's going on, and they're not in Casper as I am, let's say they're in Midwest, and they have to drive down to the courthouse, take off of work to see a record, that's a problem. I am not an attorney, but I am very active in the pro-life movement. And as all of you know in the legislature, every time the legislature passes a pro-life law, immediately there's a challenge. And to go to the courthouse several times a week to see what motions have been presented, when hearings are going to be taking place, is time consuming. We have volunteers that want to know what's going on. Also, to get a copy of the opinion of a judge costs some money. And I'm trying to understand what it says. So if we can expand that a little bit so that people, not necessarily looking for data, but looking at specific cases, that will be helpful. As mentioned, retention elections are coming up. And although the Wyoming Bar Association has information, that's not the only source that people should be able to go to make their decision whether to vote yes or no when a particular judge is up for retention. And it's difficult for the layperson to know what decision they should make. it's not enough to just say, I disagree with the decision. It's important to look at the opinion and to see how the judge made their ruling. And it's fair to the judges for the people to know that and what processes they take. It takes time to look at those documents. So whatever the committee can do to expand, to work with the clerks, to work with the judicial branch to come up with a good solution, I wish you much luck on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schriffen. Questions for Mr. Schriffen? Seeing none. Appreciate you by joining us today.
Thank you.
And we have Brandy Sorensen online. Is there anybody else in the room that wishes to testify on this? Okay. So we'll go to Brandy Sorensen, then we'll come back to the room.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I will try and keep this brief. My name is Brandy Sorensen. I am a constituent in Converse County, and I come before you today with perspective that I hope provides a unique aspect as a citizen for this conversation. I've sat on both sides of the courtroom gallery. I've been a family member of a defendant in a high-profile case out of state, and I've been the family member of a victim of a crime here in Wyoming. Sorry. Because of these experiences, I've become what some may call a law nerd. I watch and follow law and trials to learn more about that. But more importantly, I've become a firm believer that sunshine is the best disinfectant. When my brother was accused of a crime in another state, the news was everywhere, statewide and nationwide. And as a family member living elsewhere, I was traumatized and confused. But the state had electronic access to dockets and to courtrooms so that I could see when things were scheduled and see what was filed. While the media did its job, they're not and should not be the sole gatekeepers of the truth. They have limited lines. They need to keep attention, and they often focus on shock factor. But accessing the electronics filings myself, I could see the actual evidence and the court's logic. I could separate sensationalism from the law. It allowed our family to navigate the situation based on facts, not just headlines that wore off after initial shock. Contrast that with my experience as a victim's family member here in Wyoming. To know what was happening in a case that affected my family's safety, I can't just log on to the computer or have the clerk email me the motion. I have to drive to Douglas and check it multiple times a week to see what's happening. I have to walk into the courthouse and use their public terminals, which I'm grateful that that is an option. But I can't see what cases are on the docket. I can't just have access to see what's happening on any given day, to see what's happening in the community. I have a friend whose child's father was being charged in our county, and she lived out of state, but she was locked out of the process because she couldn't just run over to the courthouse to see what was happening. And that our court does not do streaming. And so your right to know what's happening in the community shouldn't be determined by your ability to take half the day off of work to drive to a courthouse. I wanted to share a specific instance where this access helped a matter of physical safety for our family. While the prosecutors were investigating my family member's case, the same perpetrator was being charged in a separate case with similar behavior, and I was able to see what was happening in that case. Because I was able to physically go to the courthouse and check the filings, I discovered a stipulated modification of bond between the prosecutor and the defense. This modification directly violated a civil protection order we had in place. The prosecutors are not parties to civil protection orders, and they didn't catch it. Had I not seen that the filing with my own eyes, the perpetrator would have been legally allowed in a location that put us at risk. Citizen oversight is a necessary safety net. We cannot expect a burden system to be perfect, and we have to have the tools to protect ourselves and be involved. I want to specifically address the concerns by Senator Nethercott regarding privacy in the internet courtroom that she mentioned during the Management Council. And I agree, we have to be mindful. We can and should protect the vulnerable. You can redact names and identifying information, personal phone numbers, home addresses, sensitive family law details. that don't serve the public interest. Some states have the filing attorneys redact the required information, and there are ways to steal sensitive motions such as autopsy or crime scene photos or protected health information. But we must not let the fear of litigating in the public overshadow the principle of transparency. Judges already have the tools to maintain decorum and admonish attorneys who step out of line. Other states have proven that you have open records without the sky falling. Finally, as citizens, we're asked to vote for our prosecutors and judges, and they cannot comment on cases. I understand the need for professional decorum, but because they can't comment, court records are the source of truth. Currently, we have no way to truly gauge their effectiveness. I can't sit in a courtroom every day for a few months or years to evaluate what an official is doing. Public access to records allows us to see how the law is being applied over a series of time. Something else to think about is when the case doesn't go to trial, the evidence doesn't go through the court. And I was told that after our case went through court, we would be able to see some evidence to help put together in our minds what happened. Since then, I've tried to access court records through multiple avenues, through law enforcement and through the court, only to be met with denials from the courts and law enforcement. I'm left to assume these denials are to avoid attention, but attention is another word for accountability. As a citizen, I shouldn't have to hire a lawyer to appeal a records denial to see what public officials found and reported on a case that's public that affects my family and the public. Many other states have open public records laws, and that provides transparency of our public tax-funded officials. We shouldn't have to travel daily or hire a lawyer or file a contested public records request just to see the court's dockets and records. And I want the transparency that allows a victim to stay safe and a defendant's family to find the truth. I've seen how this works when it's done right, and I felt the fear when the doors are closed. I want to encourage you guys to help choose sunshine. Thank you. And I will stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate your testimony. Any questions? Don't see any. We've got a lot of work ahead of us on this issue, and we appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the room on this topic? Okay, you're the last one of the day. Can we keep it brief?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Please introduce yourself again for the record.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, thank you. We spoke yesterday, but my name is Parker Jackson. I'm a staff attorney with the Goldwater Institute. I am a Wyoming resident living in Uinta County, and I'm licensed to practice in Wyoming, Utah, and Arizona. And I'm barred in at least a couple of the federal courts as well. Several years ago, in another capacity, I had some tangential involvement in a situation that many of you are familiar with an organization called Open the Books. And I interacted a little bit with the founder of that organization, and his saying in the context of transparency for public spending is every dime online in real time. We're getting closer to that. We're in the age of AI, and the technology is getting better. And in the context of court records, I think the question that you guys are kind of grappling with today is, well, what should the goal be when we're talking about transparency of court records? And even if we can't quite get to, every filing online in real time, we should be able to get pretty close to that, taking into account the discussion on confidentiality, sealed cases, redactions, et cetera. And so I kind of wanted to address just what should that look like, because I know that's come up. And maybe at least one example of some more that's doing it right. There was a mention earlier of PACER, and that's the federal court public access to court electronic records system. And it's actually one of the few areas where the federal government is ahead of us on something. PACER was actually authorized clear back in 1988. So that was before widespread internet adoption, and it took a little bit of time to get up off the ground, but that went online in 2001. So we're now 25 years later, where the public has had access to dockets and case filings in pretty much every federal case that you have access to. Now, the system is now it's antiquated, right? I mean, the Pacer's a little clunky to use, and it has some security issues. There was a hack of Pacer last year. But in talking to my paralegal that I work with on a regular basis, it's still one of the better systems out there as far as public access to records. Yes, it doesn't look pretty, but it gets the job done. And, we can pull up dockets, we can go find the filings that we need. And then the way that the fee structure for Pacer works is they charge, I think it's 10 cents a page. And then there's a de minimis threshold. So if you use less than $30 of records, which is 300 pages per quarter, so 3 months, then they don't pass that charge on to you at all. So that would get kind of at the concern you raised about having this threshold where we can serve the public without, overburdening the system. And so I think that's a good model to look at. I think that should be the baseline. That should be the bare minimum of what we should be looking at for court access, is something like Pacer for at least for filings. Regarding the question about recording and archive of video or audio, I understand that it may be a different challenge to implement that in the circuit courts or the district courts that are meeting every day. It would be very helpful, especially in the type of work I do, which is public interest, and we do a lot of work with state constitutions and in state Supreme Courts. It would be really nice to go back and look at archived appellate oral argument video. And that's something that is available for audio for the U.S. Supreme Court, and many Supreme Courts, including the Arizona Supreme Court, they have audio or video. The Arizona Supreme Court has video of all their oral arguments available online. Many of the federal circuits do that on YouTube, or it could be done through other platforms as well. And then if we can't get to that point in the district court or the circuit court level, at least being able to request those hearing recordings is helpful. One thing I'd like to address
that is already available, right, on request.
I think so. I have not personally dealt with that in Wyoming, Mr. Chairman, but anything we can do. In Arizona, I have dealt with it. My only complaint with the way Arizona does is they use discs for all their recordings, and having to go down to the courthouse and pick up a DVD or a CD or having them mail it to us is a little bit cumbersome. If that was something that could be done through a file transfer or something like that, even a USB drive would be better. Just my personal experience here in Wyoming, there are a lot of high profile cases that don't necessarily get to the Supreme Court level, which is usually what's required to get into the big legal databases like Westlaw or Lexis. Just last night, I was trying to look for a very high profile public records case that some of you are probably familiar with from a few years ago in doing some research, and I couldn't find the decision. I couldn't, and let alone the filings or the complaint. That's something that if there's something that's that high profile, that there should be some way for the public to access that, because it was the very first time that a certain portion of our public records statute had ever been enforced. And that's something that we would expect in other states would easily available online. One other improvement that could be made even within the current system is the current e-filing system is very much siloed for attorneys. If you're not a party in a case, getting access to a record in somebody else's case is very difficult. You do have to generally go down to the courthouse. And for an organization like ours, we do a lot of amicus work throughout the country. So we're not the primary party. We're filing a friend of the court brief that's very narrow and tailored to issues that are within our realm of expertise. And having access to the same filings that the party has is really important for us to be able to provide courts with that expertise and that guidance on, whether it's a tough constitutional issue that's come up or a procedural matter. So getting rid of that silo and having access outside of your own individual cases, I think is really important. So I won't go any further. I think you guys have heard the rest of what I was going to say. I think the primary concern here is that Wyoming's behind. We're about 40 years, 25 to 30 years at least behind where the federal government is. We're many years behind where other states are. And I appreciate that you guys are taking the time to look at this and provide the public with really the promise of what the Constitution does say. It does say open. It says that justice is not for sale.
Mr. Jackson, is there a state system you're familiar with that's significantly better?
I asked our paralegal this, Mr. Chairman. I would point to almost any other state as being better on public access than ours. There's very few that are less opaque than ours. I don't, because I'm still relatively young in the process, I have not done the research to figure out which state is the best. I did look through this bill that was in the meeting materials that our neighbor to the southwest just passed. I think that would be a huge improvement if something like that were maybe a starting point for this committee here moving forward.
Thank you very much. Questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Switching gears just a little bit, could you please give just a very brief assessment of the adequacy of the Wyoming State Bar's judicial performance assessment for the average citizen to determine if their judge should be retained?
Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't have a lot of personal experience with Wyoming's specifically. I have some more experience with Arizona's, since that's the state that I got licensed in first. In general, what I find with bar surveys of judges is there tends to be quite a bit of response bias. A lot of lawyers just don't make the time to respond to the surveys. And so then you get the really contentious responses, or the very positive and not a lot in the middle. I think most of the time those surveys are probably rightly going to show that judges are doing their best, but it's not going to provide a lot of insight to the public as far as what types of cases judges are deciding, when judges are recusing and whether that's appropriate or not. Are they ignoring what other courts have said or not? Those aren't things that are generally going to come out in a survey on retention. I have had some involvement in retention election matters in Arizona, but that's been from more of a structural and a constitutional standpoint, and not from an actual day-to-day standpoint.
All right. Representative Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Appreciate you being here. This is more of a comment, I think, Mr. Chairman. While we've had this discussion going on, several years ago, I had the unfortunate opportunity to have to investigate an individual from another state, and happened to be the state of Idaho. I had all kinds, this is about 8 years ago, maybe even 10. I had all kinds of information available to me as I investigated this individual. I was told during that process that they were in the midst of changing their process of how to do this. I'd have to go to a different website. I had all my stuff done before then. So this afternoon, I just Googled it and found out where it is. Not AI, Mr. Chairman, but in 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, I can't tell you the number. I just Googled the same guy's name because it's a name I'll never forget. I've got criminal, civil, traffic. I've got his wife and potential cases of hers. This is the second system that they have had, and we don't even have one yet. We're spinning our wheels. We need public access in Wyoming because the courts need to be open.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. And with that, I'll close public comment. Committee, is there any action you want to take at this point? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Fuller, you want to give us your sum up of our directives?
Yep. So Mr. Chairman, from yesterday and today, the committee requested a bill draft for the Uniform Public Expression Protection Act based on the strategic lawsuit against public participation conversation. The committee also asked for research about the inclusion of the right of freedom of religion in other states SLAP laws, anti-SLAP laws to see if that right is included. The committee asked for a bill draft to amend the statutes concerning parole ineligibility for escape and assault. A bill draft concerning interference with a peace officer for not complying with a validly issued warrant. A bill draft concerning implied consent for commercial vehicle operators to align that statute concerning the availability of a blood or urine test to align with the non-commercial statute for implied consent. A bill draft to amend the statute on homicide by vehicle for inserting additional actions that would qualify as aggravated homicide by vehicle. And then today, Mr. Chairman, 2 working groups for reviewing Title VI. And I can go through, at least the members of the committee, if you'd like. But those 2 working groups, we're charged with one with the even numbered chapters in Title VI, one with the odd numbered chapters in Title VI.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Mr. Fuller, did you mention the guardianship task force?
Yeah, I did not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The guardianship group, yes, that was appointed yesterday. And we will try to collect that information for those members to provide to Ms. Lance and Representative Stivar.
And Mr. Fuller, I would ask that this public access to court records continue on our agenda for our August meeting, even though we didn't move any action today. I think we want to keep it alive and have further discussion about it in August. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it was Representative Lucas, I might be wrong on that, in the House that had a bill that did not move in this last session that had to do with opening the courts. And I would be curious to know if we could put that on the agenda or move that as today's legislation to carry forward to the next meeting.
The preference of the committee. I think we might be a little premature on a bill draft, but committees will.
That's what I was going to say, Mr. Co-Chairman. I'm not familiar with the bill to the level that I would say, let's go ahead and sponsor it. But I think there's nothing wrong with putting it on the agenda and looking at it as a starting point for something.
And Mr. Chairman, with the committee's direction, we can just include that, I believe it was House Bill 93 as part of the meeting materials for August, if that's the committee's direction.
Will that suffice? Have it on the materials for August meeting? Good idea. Thank you. Anything else? Committee? Don't see anything. Thank you to our LSO staff for a good meeting. And thank you all for sitting in those comfortable chairs for as long as you have. We always appreciate everybody coming along. Our next meeting will be in August in Casper, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, August 10th and 11th.
August 10th and 11th in beautiful downtown Casper. And we'll see you there. Have safe travels home. We are adjourned.